I'm Jolene Wynn, and this is the Porn Addict's Wife podcast, episode number 260, interview with Dr. Trish Leigh. If your husband is struggling with a pornography problem and you want some help with it and you are not finding the resources that you like, you are in the right place. My name is Jolene Wynn. I am a certified life coach. I am an active member of the LDS faith, and I am the wife of a former porn addict. And on this podcast, I am going to share with you the tools that you need in order to start your healing journey. This is where I'm going to show you how to dive deep into intentional living, how to rekindle connection with your spouse, how to manage all that emotional turmoil that you're feeling, how to break the addiction cycle that you have to your husband's addiction, and tell you all of the ways to do that and start healing. I am so glad that you're here, and I can't wait to get started. Let's go. Hello, my ladies. Good morning. I am super excited about today's episode for you. This is an interview that I did with Dr. Trish Leigh. She is the author of a brand new book that is called Over Explicit Matter. You can get it on Amazon. And in this book, she talks about the science in your brain about pornography. And she's talking about this. She is a neuroscientist. And so she's coming at this from an understanding of the brain and how the brain works. And yet she writes it in such a way that is so easy to understand. I highly recommend that all of you guys go buy this book on Amazon and read it. And it will help you understand a little bit more about what's going on in your husband's brain if he's struggling with a pornography problem. And she was so gracious to come onto the podcast today. We had such a powerful conversation, and she is so beautiful at understanding the woman's side, the wife's side of this, and also explaining a little bit more about what's going on the man's side. So I'm so excited, so grateful to have her on this episode today. Please listen in and then go buy her book on Amazon, leave her a review on Amazon, because her book is changing lives and I cannot wait for you guys to read it. So without further ado, here is Dr. Trish Leigh.
Sounds great.
All right. I am so excited to have Dr. Trish Leigh here and to talk to us about her book and her program and everything that she does. This is so fun for me. So, Dr. Leigh, will you go ahead and just introduce yourself to my ladies?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Hello, ladies. My name's Trish Leigh. I am a cognitive neuroscientist. I pivoted all of my work into helping men recover from porn addiction about, I think it's like 8 or 9 years ago now. Thankfully, I am now the author of the best-selling porn addiction recovery book, Mind Over Explicit Matter, which actually I have here. I didn't. This is the
I do too.
OG. This is
And look
the
at all the
OG
tabs that I
version.
have.
Oh, cool. That's great. This is the original version that I wrote OG in silver marker so I don't lose it, because now there's
Yes.
a lot of copies around. That's the very first one. But that book, it came out, it debuted as a bestseller ahead of Gary Wilson's Your Brain on Porn, which was such an honor for me.
Yeah.
And I had a big book launch party, and this is for you ladies, I promise. And I was so proud of this book, not because of me. This book needs to be in the world. Your
Yes.
Brain on Porn, showed that this is a problem, but
Yes.
didn't really give men a path of
Solution.
recovery.
Yes.
So I was thrilled when the book was received so well. And, now I've gotten a lot of feedback on how it's really already starting to help people.
It's
So I am on a mission. That's why I pivoted my work. I've been married for 23 years, which we can talk about all the struggles that come with that, but, successfully married in a way that I don't think the generation right now will be able to achieve. And I am the mother of 5 children, and I have a bonus son who, I have 6 children technically. So, I don't just approach this from a neuroscience perspective. I'm a wife and a mom too.
I love that. But I actually love that. It's actually one of the things I loved about your book and reading about it and knowing your story a little bit, which I would love for you to share, is the pivot. I would love for you to share with my ladies what you used to do and why you started pivoting in doing this.
Yeah, good old fashioned. I couldn't stop thinking about it ever, which I'm sure your ladies can appreciate.
Yeah.
So, really, what happened was someone I care about deeply. I figured out that they had a porn addiction. It honestly blew my mind. Like I'm sure it's blown some
Yes.
of your minds where you're like, this can't be real. Like,
Yes.
first of all, this can't, like, okay, he watches porn. I get that. But then when I figured out it's actually an addiction,
Yes.
and this good friend of mine cannot stop doing it, even though his life is falling apart,
Yes.
I literally couldn't stop thinking about it. So my husband and I had a practice, Lee Brain and Spine. He still runs it. That client was in the office with me, and I was mostly working with people with neurodevelopmental challenges. Before that, I really focused on children
Okay.
in the past, but I also worked with adults with neuro degenerative disorders. So I really worked with people with a lot of things, but I sum it up to kind of like ADHD, anxiety, depression, those types of things, which
Hmm.
also are all the symptoms of a porn addiction.
Correct.
So, this client, I'm not able to help him get better, but then his wife makes him tell me. So I walk in and he's completely distraught and he doesn't buy into the idea of porn addiction at this time, but he's freaking out because he has to tell me. Then I just couldn't sleep. So, just my personality is I started to look into the research, and
Hmm.
I had referred him to a different colleague who did not serve him, very, very expensive. So, he went off to try to fix it. I was still doing neurofeedback, which is the primary modality that I work with people.
Hmm.
And long story short, while he's off doing his thing, still working with me, so I'm still in the loop from the neurofeedback perspective. I doubled down on learning about it, but then I trained under a few different sex addiction mentors
Hmm.
and became certified as a sex addiction recovery coach because I couldn't let it go. And then
Right.
once I figured it out, I literally had it. I know, it sounds totally cheesy, but, if you look at it from a Christian perspective, I really felt like all of my life's training, I have many different college degrees, I have a lot of certifications, those types of things. When this whole sex addiction thing happened to me, and for me, I believe,
Right.
I had this download of the program that I
Mm.
offer to men, which became the book. And that I know it sounds, yeah, yeah, download,
No,
through me, but
I no, it's 100% true. Yes.
it was really the experience. I was up here and I put together this 28-page outline and I was like printing it. The whole floor was covered. I was reordering things. And then I got done and I'm like, this is just amazing.
Yeah.
And I have to put it together. But one more thing before that, what happened was when on my desktop, there's still a folder that says passion project because I said to my husband, I'm into something that you are not going to like.
Hmm.
Do you want me to tell you about this? And he's like, no. Because I knew he'd try to shut me down. He knew he
Uh-huh.
would try to shut me down. So he's
Yes.
like, no. So I sat up here in these blue chairs and I thought to myself, am I like really going to double down on this? And like, so, anyways, I made one video and I put it on YouTube and it hit. And all these men showed up and they're like, make more content, make more content. And that's why I'm like, I got something going on here, babe. So I just started making consistent content and then I made the program.
That's amazing. I love this. This is actually something that I loved in your book, and I have so many things marked, so I'm not even gonna be able to find it. But one of the things that I loved that you mentioned in your book, it's just like this one little sentence where you're describing this. And okay, and it's on page 30 for anybody who wants to know. And you said the devastation of porn was something I felt nobody was talking about, but everybody should be. And I have this underlined, and I'm like, yes, here in the margin, because that's
Yeah.
exactly how I felt. So when my husband told me he had a pornography addiction, and that's the word he used. Many
Hmm.
people don't use that word. They say coping mechanism, problem, whatever. My husband came to me, we'd been married about 5 or 6 years, and he said, I'm addicted to porn. And I had no clue. Like that was, and nobody would have ever guessed. And and as we worked through that and went through years of relapses and all of the things, it was fascinating for me to then start talking about it. And we just initially started sharing it with, friends, close family. And I was shocked by how many people how many couples and women were like, oh my gosh, us too. This is also our story. And it was so evident to me how much of a problem this was. And thank goodness there are people like you who are helping the men. But I also realized when I started looking for help, I was like, the really only thing that I found were some Facebook support groups, which were not very positive, really negative, not very helpful at all. And I
Mhm.
said, where are the people helping the wives to get through
Mhm.
this? And I couldn't find any. So I was like, all right, I'll go do it. So that's when I went and I got certified as a coach. And I have a degree in sociology, which helped me in
Mhm.
all the things. So just exactly what you're saying. Like I felt like, okay, this is why I went through this, and this is what we're going to move forward this way. And it's just
Yes.
been so fascinating since then to feel such an urgency to broadcast this and to start talking about it in a new way. And so it's like I just love your book because it breaks down pornography addiction in such a simple formula that makes it so so doable in order to conquer, right? Whereas most people think once an addict, always an addict. You can never overcome anything. And they don't have a way to get out of it. But your formula is so simple to follow.
Thank you. And a big message I want people to know is that recovery is a process,
Yes.
and there is a beginning, a middle, and an end to it. And
Mhm.
a lot of people disagree with me on
Yes.
that, but I know it to be true. But the way I talk about it is you absolutely have to build a foundation of a lifestyle that then supports the
Yes.
authentic life you want that's porn free. It's not that you don't go through recovery and then it's over. And you
Yes.
probably know this, the idea is once you go through recovery, then you are always working on making sure you're living your best life. And that's the joke in recovery. People always say, when will I be done with recovery? And the answer is when you realize you'll never be done with recovery, because it's an amazing lifestyle, but you
Yeah.
don't have to focus on not consuming porn.
Right.
You focus on making sure that your life is balanced, your work feeds your soul, your relationship is healthy, you
Right.
have stronger interactional and communication
Yes.
abilities,
Right.
so
And I love too is that you brought up this is something that my husband and I talk about a lot is my husband doesn't even have the urge to watch pornography anymore in that because he recognized and was able to find the tools to learn how to address the underlying issue, right? The emotional um problem,
dysregulate. Yeah,
the dysregulation. I was
dysregulation.
like, what's the
It
word?
is. Yeah.
Right? The
Yeah.
emotional
Yeah. Hmm.
dysregulation and
Hmm.
actually regulate that. And when you regulate that
Hmm.
and you learn how to do that and you learn those skills, then you don't need the coping mechanism.
Yes.
Yes.
But there's one piece to it that I want people to know also, is that at the core of a porn addiction is neurological dysregulation.
Yeah.
Everybody loses sight that, most men and more women can
Yes.
start consuming porn in adolescence or even
Yes.
childhood now.
Yes.
So the underdeveloped brain, that brains develop until 28. So the brain's not even developed, and now it becomes hijacked and it develops in a neurologically dysregulated way.
Yes.
That's why it's so difficult to leave porn,
Hmm.
because underlying the emotional dysregulation is the brain dysfunction that's causing it.
Yeah.
So that's why when that download happened, I'm like, neurofeedback is literally the perfect solution for porn addiction, because it unconsciously addresses the neurological dysregulation at the core. And then it
Hmm.
becomes so much easier for people to change their behaviors.
Yes.
But yeah, once you do that, then I tell my clients all the time, we're skill building here.
Yes.
one one client and I, and he's doing great, but it's been a longer journey than I would like it to be for him.
Hmm.
Um, he's trying to get me to tell him that he doesn't have to change his life. This
Ah.
was like 2 weeks ago. He's like, all I have to do is do the brain training. I'm like, no. I'm like, at the beginning, we want you to do the brain training because that's what shifts the brain. But you've been with us for a while now. Like right now, you're literally at like 60% you have to change your life, 40% keep doing the training, because the training facilitates you making the changes. Like his
Right.
work's super stressful. He's living with his parents still, even though he's older.
Hmm.
He can't facilitate the relationships that he wants. So it's like, we're skill building here, man. You have to
Yes.
build these skills to be able to get over to the other side of this thing.
100%.
Mhm.
And I think that that's something that is so fascinating and something I love when people like to say, you can't conquer addiction, or if people say, as the wife, like this will be your relationship is just going to be different. You can't ever get past this. Is I feel like people misunderstand the brain. And I'm not a neuroscientist like you, but I have worked with enough clients and I've studied enough and know enough about the brain. I'm like, the brain is plastic. The brain is
Mhm.
something that you can use as a tool and you can change. None of us are the same person that we were when we were 6 years old. Thank goodness. We're not who we were in
Right.
middle school. God bless. And
Mhm.
we are different people now, and you can always change that. But it takes learning the tools and applying them intentionally in order to do so. It's just that most of us just allow our brain to run on automatic, right? Just running off the motivational triad, running off of our immediate desires and immediate gratification and our desire to get out of pain, and that's what and actually hijacks our own healing, especially as the wife, is that we refuse to allow ourselves to change enough for a future to look different.
Yeah. And when it comes to wives or to partners, the interesting part of it, and I'm being very careful because at the beginning of the journey, you probably know this. At the beginning of the journey, nobody wants to hear this, but like the relationship dynamics that you had, people think they had like the people see that, or not all of them, but many people think they had a perfect relationship. But
Oh,
this
I
is what
did
I
totally,
know.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yes, yes,
Yeah. But like with porn in the mix, it's all artificially kind of
yeah.
stimulated. So, but I truly believe that through the journey, people can get the relationship that they've wanted.
Hmm.
And like it's there for the taking, but the dynamics have to change
Yes,
and interaction. And most times, the easiest way to think about it is most relationships are codependent.
yeah.
Some of them are disengaged. Most disengaged means actually my best friend, her relationship, she knows this, so this is not speaking out of turn. They're and she's actually done a really good job working on it in the past years. But when we met them, they're completely disengaged. They don't know what the other person's doing at any time. You know what I mean? At all. And we're looking at them like, what is happening? But my relationship was completely codependent.
Mm,
So I had to learn to be able to step away and make an interdependent relationship. And
yes,
I have to be honest that I swung too far because I only learned how to be completely enmeshed. So then at the beginning, I only knew how to be completely separate.
yes,
Getting back to connected but
yes,
strong was a very difficult decade long journey for me.
absolutely.
And that's what partners can benefit from. Then when you're strong, you're both strong and whole and healthy and you know it and
Yeah,
you're next to each other, that's an interdependent relationship and it's amazing. And
yes.
you have no clue how much better it can be than the thing that you had.
Yes. And that's what my husband and I talk about all the time. It's like we thought we had a great relationship and we did,
Mhm.
except that this was going on.
Mhm.
And through over the last, we've been married for, I don't know how old I am, 17 years. Then it is now at a completely different place, a place that I didn't even know existed, which is so
Mhm.
fascinating. Because if you had asked me then, everyone always used to ask me, like, how's life? And I'm like, I love being married, 10 out of 10. But at
Mhm.
now, I feel like, oh my gosh, that was like a two. I had no
Yes.
idea the level that you can get to, but it does take individual work on both parties because you get so used to how you interact and you don't even recognize the codependency. You don't even recognize what it is that
Mhm.
you're attaching
Mhm.
your worth and value to. And I think that that's the biggest thing that comes up for my ladies. And it came up for me as well in learning the pornography is it brought up my own stuff, which you talk about in the book, right? It brings up your own stuff from your childhood. It brings up your own
Mhm.
trauma, your own beliefs about
Mhm.
yourself, the own like the feeling that you're not enough, but your husband didn't create that. And his pornography problem didn't create that. Like you've had that
Mhm.
since you were a kid, especially
Mhm.
prepubescent, right? Since it started in what, seventh
Mhm.
grade, right? When everyone's a
Mhm.
problem and you hate yourself, right? And that's where it started. And this is just the thing that brings it up. And so when you
Yeah.
heal that, then you can come to a place, which I talk to my clients all the time of, you can get to a place where you don't need him,
Mhm.
but you can choose him because you want him.
Mhm.
And that's a much
Yes.
more powerful place because it's not out of obligation or out of taking, but out
Mhm.
of giving
Yeah,
and
totally.
choice.
And my husband and I, in the middle of one of our uh transition times in life, I said to him, I'm like, can I trust you moving forward?
Yeah.
And some coach who was steering him wrong, by the way, because it did not
It
work out well for him.
happens.
It does. Some coach told him like to tell me no, you know? So I'm like, can I trust you moving forward? And he's like, no, you can't. And I'm like, what do you mean? And I'm like, all right. So I had to go away and think about that. And I tell him, which still makes him a little irritated. I tell him that was the greatest gift you gave me that
Mm,
day. I was very upset that day though. So
yeah.
I did, it's not like I took the gift and I'm like, "Oh, thank you so
Thank
much.
you
I'll
so
never be able to
much.
trust
That's
you."
exactly what I want.
But exactly what I wanted. But I went away going, he's probably right. Even if he tells me I can trust him,
Yes.
like maybe I can't.
Right.
And do I need to trust him?
Yes.
Because before that moment, I had thought of, I have to be able to know I can trust you from now until the end of time for us
Yes.
to stay together. And
100%.
in that moment, I thought to myself, I don't have to trust him. I have to trust myself and my
Yes.
intuition.
Yes.
And if we want to go, I have to trust God. When
Mhm.
I'm hearing, I always talk about it as my spider senses. My spider senses are tingling. That's when I have to have the courage to approach him and say, something's off. We
Yeah.
need to talk about this. And hopefully we're better at communicating. But that was the greatest gift. And I said to him, I understand I can't trust you. And now I know I don't need to
Yes.
because I'm choosing you every day. I'm choosing
Yes.
this relationship every day. I don't even have to be committed till the end of time. I just have to be committed until it doesn't feel right to me. And then we dive into whatever we can do. It really
100%.
transformed my need for him. It
Mhm.
was more, I'm choosing this every minute of every day.
Yes.
You know,
I love
it's a
that so
whole new
much.
level of commitment. It's actually
Yeah.
better. So if your listeners or your viewers don't understand the distinction, it's so much better than like being lifelong committed to somebody no matter what. When you know you're choosing that person every day, even though they're not perfect, even though
Yeah.
they have problems, even though they might not tell you everything all the time immediately, you can handle it. And it takes emotional intelligence to be able to do that.
100%. That's something I talk about. I call it conscious trust. Is we have so many lies that we believe about trust. This is a little tangent. We have so many lies we believe. One of them is that us trusting someone else is up to them, right? It's like, well, they're just either a trustworthy person or they're not, or they have to earn my trust. Well, they can do all the right things and you can still choose not to trust them. And so many of my clients and so many women are in that, right? Their husband is doing
I love it.
literally everything that they thought would make them feel better and they don't feel better, right?
Yep.
But when you can get
Yep.
to a place where you trust yourself enough to be able to handle, hey, if I put my trust in him and I say, I'm going to trust you, and then he doesn't do the thing you think you want him to do,
Want to.
well, can you trust yourself to handle that? Can you
Hmm.
trust yourself to deal with and process the emotion that comes up and be able to work through that? And that's really the ticket to trusting someone else is trusting yourself.
Yeah, I love that.
Yes.
And I tell people to play a game. I tell men this and women in this situation, partners, to play a game that pretend that you're divorced without getting divorced. Take
Mm-hmm.
divorce off the table, especially in the early days, because people who can't handle it, they're like, I'm out.
Yeah.
I'm like, you don't have to
Emotional
be out.
decision. Yes.
You don't have to be out, but what
Yeah.
you can do is play the game that you're divorced without being divorced. And then start living your life like that because you know what it does? It takes the expectations out of what that partner does for you. You start seeing all the holes you're filling with your partner, both
Interesting.
people. And it's really like that's what makes you become interdependent. So, like one of my mentors tells women, get a job right away. And
Ooh.
it's like not even because of the money,
Right.
so that you are out there doing something purposeful and then you do have some control over your financial
Mm-hmm.
life. And if your husband is your source of income, get that going in weekly transfers so
Yeah.
that you're independent. And I love that. So that really changed some things for me too, because I realized, like, don't get me wrong, my husband still does all of my laundry. but but like but
I don't let
like
my
in
husband
the
touch the laundry. He does it
Oh
wrong.
my gosh, he doesn't let me touch it. I do it wrong. So it's so funny because he's like, no, 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 I'll do your laundry. I'm like, I can do my own laundry, man. He's like, no, you can't. I'm like, okay, you can do my laundry for me. But it's just like, okay, I could see. And then I'm like, there's a hole that I've been filling with him. I'm gonna fill it myself.
Yeah.
And with my children too, like my mother,
Yeah.
who hopefully will never see this, is like a covert narcissist who is basically using my siblings. She's got them all on a schedule. One sibling has to come over to
Mm.
her house each day. Like she's making them come over and take care of her, even though that's not necessary. I
Mm-hmm.
learned a lot from that because I'm like, oh, I have so many kids and they really do make me feel like an important person. The
Yes.
need to be needed. That's what
Yes.
codependency is.
Uh-huh.
I'm like, look at how many people need me all the time. Wow, I'm amazing. But then I changed that. Like, I started having them do more things for themselves. Like, I
Yes.
am needed less by them. And they're
Yes.
growing older. Now they're young adults, but that was a huge gift to me too, even though it felt awful in the moment. I'm like, because they're more independent. They don't need
Mhm.
me, but that's the goal of
That is the
parenting,
goal.
right?
Yes.
You
And that's
know,
why so many
so
women struggle with that. And then their kids leave and then they
mhm.
go through this empty nest crisis because they don't know who they are or can't emotionally regulate because they've been doing it with their children.
Yes, that's
Yes.
exactly right. That's exactly right. And
Yeah.
I've really learned a lot in the last couple of years. My youngest now is 14.
Mm-hmm.
And she's funny because she says the other day, she's like, Mom, you really need a sport. She rides horses and
Oh.
she loves it. So and I box. I love to box. I have a
Oh,
boxing bag
cool.
and I have been wanting to go to the boxing club in town. But I said to her, she's 14 and a half, which means she'll drive in a year here where I live. I go, babe, if I go to the boxing club, you don't go to the barn. I'm like, it's just the reality. So
Yeah.
I'm like, I said I have a boxing bag downstairs. That's all I can manage right now.
Yeah.
And I've been parenting people for 23 years. So
Long time.
I have, 4 more years until you're 18. But I've already, I've had a boxing bag for almost 10 years. I got a better one with the punch trackers. So like, I'm positioned with my own passions.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just choosing to continue to nurture,
Yes.
which then I don't feel hostage to my
Yes.
kids. I'm like, and then I do take time for myself. She's like, "Can we go to the barn tonight?" No. Because I'm
Yes.
going out with my friends. So, like,
Yes.
you can build that bridge in the seasons of life,
Mm-hmm.
but recognizing, like, that's the interdependence, and you can have it with your children too. It's such a beautiful thing. It's
I
really
love
beautiful.
that so much.
Hmm.
Okay, I do have a question
Yeah.
about I've just this popped up as you were talking. Do you mostly work with men or do you have some women who struggle with porn addiction as well?
Yeah, I mostly work with men. I have only worked with 3 women. And not
Okay.
because, but I know the number. That's how sparse it is.
Hmm.
Um, I actually just got done. It's not, I haven't put it out to be published, but I just did a study
Hmm.
of it ended up being 200 brain maps. That's how I can assess what a person's brain is doing. And it was 200 men and 2 women, but they have the same brain pattern of
Well,
porn
that's
addiction,
fascinating.
which is really fascinating. But, and, women just don't struggle like men do, historically speaking, but that
Right.
is shifting. It's
Yes.
shifting and it's different. It's different, but there will be more women. But
Yes.
it's basically the same.
Yes. Okay. I was wondering then if women respond. I mean, obviously, my husband and I've worked with some men and coached some men who struggle with pornography addiction, but I was curious if women tend to respond a little bit differently or if it's the same neurological
It's
response.
yeah, it's the same neurological response, but what I know from addiction sciences, but
Hmm.
not necessarily porn addiction.
Hmm.
The porn addiction studies show that women's brains are impacted basically the same as men's,
Got
but addiction studies show that when women become addicted to something, whether that be a substance or a behavior, it's more difficult for women to step away from the addiction,
Oh, that's
which I
interesting.
thought that it is an interesting finding.
Do we know
And
why? Do they have theories?
No, no,
Not yet.
it no. And that was actually a little bit of an older study, but
Mhm.
I could wax and wane on all the
Sure.
variables, but it could be like, some of the variables that we're talking about here with
Right.
wives and moms, they really do have a lot on their plate. So if it comes down to self-medicating,
Sure.
there's a lot more balls in the air for a
Totally.
lot of women. So,
Yeah. Oh, that makes sense. That makes
yeah.
sense. One thing I would love for you to explain to my ladies, which is something I talk about a lot and trying to explain to them, but if you wouldn't mind going into the dopamine cycle and to help them
Mhm.
understand what it is that's going on in the brain, because there's so many times the biggest hurdle my ladies have is that they've connected that their husband's pornography problem has something to do with them, right? Must because they're not
Mhm.
enough, not sexual enough, not much as not doing something right as the sexual partner because we
Mhm.
believe
Mhm.
pornography has to do with sex,
Mhm.
which it doesn't. And you just do such a great job of breaking down the dopamine cycle, and I was wondering if you could outline that for my ladies and just help them
I
understand this a little bit more.
I absolutely can. And before I do that, I would like to tell them something though.
Okay.
And hopefully you can receive this and not be mad at me yet again.
Oh, please.
Is that no, because I have gotten emails. What did you make that video about? I'm like, it's just true. But once you understand it, you can use it to empower you. This is the thing, is that I made a video saying to men that when someone becomes addicted to pornography, it decreases their attraction to their partner.
Yes.
And that's a bummer because that's a major reason that partners then think they're not attractive enough, they're not
Correct.
as sexual enough. My point about that is you could never be attractive enough. Men tell
Yes.
me all the time, a lot of men will tell me, my wife is a 9.5. She's a knockout and she will do anything. But I still have ED with her
Yes.
and I still can't stop watching porn. That is because of the dopamine cycle.
Yes.
And the dopamine cycle is also what creates all the mood instability, going back to the emotional dysregulation. So, the easiest way to talk about it, and the way I talk about it in the book, is that when someone has the urge or a craving to watch porn, especially if they're wrapped up in this cycles for people when they are, in a compulsive
Mm-hmm.
mode. But when they have the urge, the dopamine already starts dripping. So dopamine starts flowing. I call it the 4D cycle of dopamine. It starts dripping. They will feel it. They will feel it as an urge. The interesting thing is, I can see this in people's brains on the data that we keep when we work with
So
clients. It's amazing.
fascinating.
Yeah. And it basically usually happens after a stress spike. So I
Yes.
see a stress spike, a dopamine spike, which means they've had an urge. From science, we know that that person has 3 seconds to pivot, or more and more dopamine keeps flowing. And that's what I call the dopamine deluge. It becomes a flood of it, more and more and more, which moves the person towards consuming porn because the
Yes.
dopamine's already flowing. Many people misperceive it as the dopamine doesn't start until they start watching porn. It
Mm.
actually is cranking before that.
Yes.
And so, like, if your husband is all angry and all of a sudden he's happy, it's because he's had the idea to watch porn
Mm. Interesting.
and it's already flowing in their system.
Mm-hmm.
So then when they consume porn, especially masturbate, and especially there's all different levels of,
Yes.
what they're consuming and what it does for them, that's a dopamine drowning. So their brain, the reward center and the
Yep.
pathways will be flooded with dopamine. That's what desensitizes the dopamine receptors in their brain. Then they feel numbed out. They feel good for the time. A lot of times that's what helps men sleep. So they'll use it as sleep medication. It does ultimately disrupt sleep, but
Right.
then it leaves a person in a dopamine drought or a deficit state of dopamine. So the next day they go to do their work and people start not liking their work. This
Yes.
is like this is a hidden symptom. You don't like your work anymore and you've always loved it because there's not enough dopamine there. People
Mm-hmm.
stop doing their hobbies. All
Yes.
they want to do, they're pulled back to watch porn. And
Right.
the easiest way to talk about it is porn becomes a level 20 dopamine source for them, a super normal stimulus.
Mm-hmm.
Healthy, normal stimuli are between 0, which would be a bummer, but 0 and 10. And
Okay.
baseline healthy arousal is at 5.
Okay.
So if you're just sitting on your couch, you're chilling, you're at a 5.
Okay.
Then, if your partner wants to have sex with you, that becomes a 6, 7, 8. And then I always joke, like your partner's probably an 8 or a 9 on a really good day. If your partner's mad at you about your porn habit, she's a solid 3. And
Yeah.
so then,
Exactly. Yes.
so if your partner's a solid 3 and you need 20
Mm-hmm.
to be aroused, we've
Yep.
got this 17-point gap. And
Yes.
that gap is what crushes
A
relationships. And
hundred
it's
percent.
about the dopamine gap that's there.
Yes. I always equate this to food for my ladies because, as women, we always struggle with our weight. So it makes sense. This is,
Hmm.
and I'm
Hmm.
always saying it's like the urge to have some very high sugar, high concentrated sugar. It's like there's the natural sugars that our body will get like a 5, maybe a 6 when you eat an apple. And then you have, like a Cold Stone ice cream cake, and that's a 20. And so your brain is like, well, let's do that, especially when I'm on a
Hmm.
diet and I'm feeling like I'm at a 1. And my brain's like, yeah, let's go back to what's easier because this isn't working.
Yep.
This is
Yeah.
not
And
producing the level of pleasure that I want to
definitely.
be having.
Yeah.
Yes.
I use a very similar analogy where I say sex with your partner is like a French meal. If you've ever gone to a French restaurant, like
Yes.
the portions are teeny
So
tiny.
small. So
They are
small.
they are so small, but every bite is delicious. It doesn't hit
Mm.
like a huge piece of chocolate cake,
Yes.
but like, the butter is from a French countryside that only has
Yes.
17 cows because you can taste the richness and the rounded out quality of it. And
Mhm.
that goes back to what I call the happiness trifecta is dopamine plus serotonin for joy and happiness plus oxytocin for connection.
Mm.
That's what healthy sex and a healthy sexual experience should be
Right.
like. But if somebody has been going back to porn for since they were 10,
Yes.
so we'll say 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, whatever it might be, they're used to going to chocolate cake. So they
Yes.
can't even appreciate they begin to lose the appreciation for sure
Yeah.
of the French meal.
100%.
Mhm.
I remember when my husband first told me about his addiction, I cognitively I understood it because I
Mhm.
mean, we all live in the world. I have seen pornography. I've been exposed
Mhm.
to it. So I understood. I was like, okay, I get the pull to it. I understand its appeal.
Mhm.
And there was that aspect of it that I understood on an intellectual level. But I also did not understand at the time, obviously, everything that I do now about it, right? Everything that you're
Mhm.
describing. And I remember asking my husband, over the years, talking to him about how it isn't about what is you're looking at on the screen. Because I have so many
Mhm.
women that they're like, well, I want to know what he's looking at. I want to know if I
Mhm.
look
Mhm.
like them. They'll go back and they'll
Mhm.
watch everything their husband has watched
Mhm.
in order to try and diagnose what it is that he wants that
Mhm.
she doesn't have, right? And that's
Mhm.
the part where we want to be in control, and it's that false sense of
Mhm.
control that if there's a puzzle piece that I can just solve, then I can fix it and
Fix
then
it.
he'll get
Mhm.
better and this will all
Mhm.
go away, right? And I
Mhm.
was talking to my husband, and I would love for you to go to explain
Mhm.
this more, is that it's not about what's on the screen, it's about what comes next. It's about that it never ends. It's about that he can just keep clicking. And it doesn't even matter
Yeah.
what it is necessarily. It's just that it doesn't end and that there's
Well,
another
it
one.
it matters for the individual person, but it's
Yes, right.
because their brain got linked to that thing
Yes.
for very high levels of dopamine.
Yes.
And if you just think about it logically, all this is so logical once you can
Right.
think about it, is that like most of porn is very violent
Yes.
and like it doesn't include intimacy at all.
Right.
There's tolerance building and escalation that
Uh-huh.
happens over time. And your husband or your partner chose you long after that was happening for them. And that's another piece of the shame aspect that
Yes.
comes from it is that they need it for the high levels of dopamine. And then, yes, the searching and the seeking behavior
Hmm.
and the ability at a click to be able to ramp up the dopamine.
Yes.
And then, unfortunately, what happens is I call it the friction point. I took motorcycle lessons a few years ago. And to be able to do the throttle,
Uh-huh.
you have to hit the friction point where there's enough tension in the system
Oh,
to be
okay.
able to go, like to be able to go so as I was taking those lessons, I thought this is kind of what's happening for men with porn.
Mm.
They want things that are anxiety provoking too, but no healthy individual
Yes.
wants it in their actual sexual relationship. This is just what gives them more dopamine and cortisol. It gives them more of a rush. Cortisol is
Yes.
the stress hormone. So it's like this is what activates the system in a way that then produces the numbing effect.
Mm.
It's being used for mood regulation. It's
Right.
not sexuality at all. I
Yes.
know it's so difficult for partners.
Yes.
That's why I like partners to know that, I'll liken it to a gambling addiction because
Yes.
when
I
it's
always
money,
liken it
like,
to gambling or alcohol
yeah,
or anything.
yeah. And gambling is a behavioral addiction, so there's no substance.
Sure.
But I also liken it to an eating disorder, like you
Yes.
already did,
Hmm.
because the mechanisms in the brain are very much like an eating disorder because you
Yes.
don't have to gamble. So that's a
Yes.
behavior, but not one you have to do. You do have to eat to stay
Yes.
alive. Most people, healthy sexuality evolutionarily is very healthy. So for most people, that is part of life that needs
Right.
to stay in. But it's about learning not to eat in an unhealthy way,
Yes.
learn to, and then eating disorders very much are. Like when someone overeats, the dopamine mechanisms
Yes.
are affected in the same way.
Mhm.
But then I think about partners, and hopefully this will help some of the ladies that you work with think about this. An eating disorder like anorexia, and I'm sure you know that there's intimacy anorexia and there's reactive intimacy anorexia for partners. In anorexia, food is supposed to be dopamine
Yes.
producing, but at a level 6, not at a 20. For partners, it becomes cortisol producing. That's what happens in anorexia. People can't eat because something has happened that makes eating stressful.
Mm.
So now, as a partner, generally at some point in their sexual relationship with their
Yes.
partner who's addicted to porn, this a sexual experience becomes very cortisol
Yes. A
producing
hundred
for them.
percent.
It's difficult to be with your partner because you
Yes.
don't feel safe and secure in the
Very
relationship,
unsafe. Yes.
which goes back to attachment, and we can talk
Yes.
about that. But that's why for both partners we have disrupted dopamine cortisol
Mhm.
mechanisms in the brain. For both partners, when I talk about getting back to that interdependent relationship, it's about regulating the nervous system
Yes.
back to healthy levels of dopamine, healthy levels of serotonin, offsetting cortisol as much as humanly possible,
Yes.
oxytocin for connection.
I love this. And this is why I love what you do as well in your approach because it's so vital for the women, for the wives to hear that their own healing is just as crucial as the husband, which this is all my ladies know this because they're listening to me. So
Yeah.
they know that and that's what they're doing and they're
Well,
amazing.
if I may offer them a suggestion,
Please.
is that okay? Is that I would actually contend that their healing could be a catalyst for their partner's
That's what my
healing.
husband says.
And
Everyone always asks my
uh-huh,
husband, they're like,
uh-huh,
all right, well, what can I do? And my husband always says, the one thing that you could do is you go get help. You go
yep,
heal because, and he talks about this with me. He says that it was the most helpful thing because as the wife, we try to do all the things. We say yes, we
mhm,
put on lingerie. We try to do all the things that
mhm,
we think are going to
are
be
gonna fix
helpful
it.
because we've
Mhm,
connected it to sex and it
mhm,
doesn't work, obviously.
mhm,
And then we feel like, well, then there's nothing I can do. We feel very out of control, which is something we just learn how to regulate. But then my husband always talks about when I started my own healing journey and kind of working through all of this, is it lifted so much off of him because he felt so much shame, so much guilt, so much responsibility, which yes, it was, his fault, whatever, but he felt so
mhm,
much responsibility for what I was going through. And when I
mhm,
took that on myself, then it
mhm.
freed him to take the emotional responsibility for his own behavior and healing. And that's when he was actually able to work through it.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
And neuroscience shows that, and this comes from a gambling study, but a lot of studies actually, but I love it and it applies here. And I've seen it and I can tell you how I've seen it is that the greater the loss, the faster and easier a person with an addiction commits to the treatment or whatever they need, the journey to be able to get better. So the greater the loss, this is
Uh-huh.
why women have to learn how to drop and hold a healthy boundary,
Yeah.
but lovingly and
Yes.
compassionately, and not like I'm out of here,
An
but also
ultimatum.
not
Right.
not I'm gonna, it goes back to stress responses too, which I
Yes.
talk about in the book. There's fight, flight, freeze, and fawn.
Hmm.
And fawning is what a lot of partners do. Fawning's dancing around and trying to make everything okay.
Yes.
So like it's a stress response. And when you realize that, like you're super stressed out,
Of
you're trying
course
to
you'll
figure it
respond.
out.
Yes.
So you're fawning around, putting on lingerie, figuring out.
Yes.
But when you step away from that and you say, babe, I know this is very difficult for you and this might be a big thing for you, but I'm not staying in this position forever.
Yes.
You know, I need you to go do all the things that you need to do. And then when women come to the rock bottom moment, like, nope, I'm not staying in this. And for a lot of people, it's not just porn addiction. So,
Right.
and we also can talk
Yes.
about this. It leads to infidelity, into
Yes.
acting out, to paid sex with sex
Yep.
workers. It leads to a lot. So some of the women are sitting there with this big thing, a big
Yes.
secret, and a lot of pain and having no clue what to do about it. But when they say to their partner, I'm here for you, I'm here with you, I'm going to work on myself, but it takes the strength to setting a boundary, no sweat.
Yes.
Holding a holding a
Yeah,
boundary,
exactly.
different story. So
Yes.
you have to learn to say, okay, but and partners time out. And I don't know if you know this phrase. One of my mentors taught me it, and it resonated with me. Like, a partner wants their man to recover from their porn addiction and start working on, life with them.
Yes.
But, they want, as they get healthier and healthier, they're not going to stay in that toxic dynamics, which we
Yeah.
can talk about in a second. And let me just throw out what those toxic dynamics are. If a person is still a man, we'll just use, stereotypical.
Yeah.
If your man is wrapped up in it, it does lead to low key manipulation or high key manipulation.
Yes.
It leads to lying, it leads to justifying. They're just doing it as defense mechanisms, but it
Yes.
is discounting your reality.
Right.
And so I don't want any partner staying in a situation where the reality is being discounted all the time.
Right.
That's awful
It
for
is.
women. So I want women to get to a point where they see their husband using that defense mechanism, and there comes a day. But the day, I want it to be a healthy day where they go, I'm not doing this
Yes.
anymore.
Yes.
I love you, but this is the last day you will be
Yes.
lying to me. So either you figure it out, or that's the healthy boundary. Like, there's no more lies. We're on this same page. It will take us as long as it takes us,
Right.
but we're in this together.
Mm-hmm.
And I always characterize that as, partners getting on the same page against the hijacker of addiction.
A hundred
Because it's
percent.
not your partner, it's the hijack
Yes.
brain mechanisms, So when the two of you get on the same page, but that's not an easy thing to do. So,
No.
it shouldn't be underestimated. But, then that healthy boundary is when a woman says no to the toxic dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
And then when her man knows that was a real no, not the fake one she's told me
Yes.
300 times, that one was real.
Mm-hmm.
That real no hits the nervous system. I've seen it in people's brains. It's wild. It
Yeah.
creates what I call a brain reset,
Mm.
because my clients will come in and I can see all of their brain functioning day to day when they're in the program with me, and I'll be like, "What happened here last Tuesday?" Cuz everything shifted down.
Mm.
And he'll be like, "My wife's leaving me. She's had enough."
Mm.
But that's the day when he's ready to double down on all the things that he needs
Mm-hmm.
to, because it's affected the brain.
Absolutely. So this reminds me, just there was one moment when my husband was struggling with pornography. Was there was never a time that I was like, all right, I'm out. It never even
Mhm,
occurred to me.
mhm,
And I was just like, all right, I'm in. We're gonna face this.
mhm,
And but when then my husband struggled with attraction to other women, which I'm sure, as you
mhm,
know, is like a kind of a side effect, right? It all just kind of bleeds in there. And we worked through that. And that was when I told him, so this was in the last few years, like we were past the porn addiction. And then I found out about all of this. And I said, I'm not interested in this kind of relationship. And
mhm,
I know that this may take some time for you to rewire your brain around this, and I'm
mhm,
okay with that. But just so you know, this is not what I'm interested in. I'm not
mhm.
staying with this kind of relationship.
Yes.
And he said that that was a very strong moment for him, was just like, okay, I better figure this out. Because at the
Yes.
time, and this is a whole different topic, is he did not think that him being attracted to other women was a problem. Right? It's
Mhm.
like everyone's, well, all guys
Well,
watch porn, which he didn't agree with,
yeah.
right? He always
Mhm,
thought porn was
mhm,
wrong. But he was
mhm.
just like, I don't know, he'd been taught since he was young that guys are
Yes.
just going to be attracted to all the
Mhm.
women. And as
I've
long as
heard it
you're
a
just not
million
sleeping around at
times.
the end of the day, you're good.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I it's lusting is what it
Yeah,
is. And
exactly.
and actually it is a side effect. Side effect's the wrong word, but it's
Right.
part of the
The correlation.
it's
Right.
part of the transition, I would say,
Yes.
because when a person stops watching porn and their brain still needs high levels of dopamine, they will try to get it anywhere. And
Mm.
then the place they end up going is all the bodies walking around them. And
Yes.
actually that develops through the porn addiction too,
Sure.
but it becomes worse when a person is staying away. And
Mm.
I tell my clients all the time, like, when it gets weird, just let me know, because we'll know you're moving in the
Yes.
right direction. Like,
Sure.
they'll search out lower key things because they're
Mm-hmm.
trying really hard not to watch porn proper. So
Mm-hmm.
they'll search out other things to get the hit of dopamine. They'll
Sure.
start lusting after people.
Mm-hmm.
But that and to make a comment about what you were saying, like, you never had, like, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Th- and this is probably obvious, but for partners, there's a continuum. There's totally a
Mhm.
continuum. There's the people who bounce the very first second.
Yes.
That's still low emotional maturity. Like you can't stay in a difficult situation with
Yeah.
your partner. Unfortunately, on the other side of the continuum, there's partners who stay in a very toxic
Very
situation.
toxic. Yes.
Like I
Yes.
work with women who are 75. They've been in this thing for 40 years. I'm like,
Yes.
no, like that's
Yes.
just and they're sick and everything is they're in a lot of pain.
Yeah.
So, what I want people to do is those two extremes come into the middle
Yes.
where you do stay in your relationship and you try to be, a facilitator,
Hmm.
but, I always say it takes two to tango. It takes
Yes.
two people to have a healthy relationship. It only takes one person to have an unhealthy, toxic
Yes.
relationships. And you can't make your partner join you, but
Right.
you can influence them. And that's why I think the healthy boundaries are one of the largest influences.
A hundred
And then
percent.
just one more comment about something you said earlier that, a lot of organizations for betrayal trauma will just characterize all people, all men who consume porn as narcissistic abusers.
Yes.
And that is too global of a characterization, too. But that is the top end
Yes.
of people who porn has really infiltrated their nervous system. I actually have a client or two who I can feel that. I know they're probably not a 10, they're like a 8.5. Full
Uh-huh.
blown tens would never be in my program.
Sure.
You know what I mean? But 8.5s are there for the enjoyment of watching me and my
Hmm.
team try to help them.
Sure.
That's
Yes. Yes.
but even the people down at the lower end of the continuum, because of the essence of those high levels of dopamine, dopamine is the molecule of motivation, more, and pleasure. It makes the man who's watching porn objectify, especially the women
Hmm.
around them,
Hmm.
but life ends up becoming like a way to get dopamine, and I call it
Yes.
the narcissistic bubble. And just social media in and of itself and screens in and of itself is creating more. I've been looking
Yes.
into the science on this because I'm starting to write my second book on just screen
Excellent.
addictions. Yeah, so it's exciting. But even looking at children, how this is creating, self-objectified women,
Yes.
and it's creating narcissistic men who, at the swipe of anything, can just look
Hmm.
at women as dopamine for their pleasure.
A hundred
So
percent.
even the most innocent, wonderful man ever who gets addicted to porn gets this element of narcissistic and accidental abuse.
Yes.
That's what I want women to look at. Like, try to figure out where your man is at. Is he a 2? Is he a 10? Like,
Mm-hmm.
if there's full-blown abuse and your partner doesn't care at all, they don't care at all about you, and I've worked with women who have been in that case.
Yeah.
It may be very difficult to get on the same page, but
Yes.
especially the vast majority, the 99% of people affected by pornography are super wonderful people who are just in this trap.
Right. And I love that you have such a clear way out. So, okay, I'm
Mhm.
so glad you came on today. Can you tell my ladies how they can get your book and how and all about your program and everything like that?
Yeah, yeah, please. I would love to. So, what I know actually, hate to be a know it all, but knowing the science is really important. So, what needs to happen for people who are addicted to pornography for them to escape as quickly and efficiently as possible is a five-pronged approach. So, it's neurological,
Hmm.
addressing those underlying brain dysfunction and dysregulation, then using your mind, using your body, absolutely including your relationship. Porn is a relational issue,
Hmm.
which we could be here for an hour just talking about that. And then lastly is the spiritual transformation. It
Hmm.
really is about a person building a foundation of a lifestyle that feeds their soul. So many people are trapped in passive consumption of social media as their
Hmm.
only form of entertainment or hobbies. So, anyways, the program that I developed in that download addresses all five of those pieces. Many other programs don't address the brain function.
Right.
So when I help people, and I write about it in the book, and actually
Hmm.
the publisher was going to take that out about QEEG brain mapping and neurofeedback, and I get why they were going to do it. The way I first wrote it, um, I had to tweak how I wrote it, but I said to them, this cannot come out because this is the way
Yes.
people can get better fast. It has to stay. Like, I know it's advanced technology. They wanted the
Mhm.
book to be all encompassing where people didn't have to go purchase
Oh,
anything,
sure.
but and I get that, but I'm like, we're telling them to go to therapy, so let's tell them to get their brain
Yes.
assessed and start training their
Absolutely.
brain. So that's what my team and I help people do. So I've created a digital program. It has 134 lessons. The original program has 94 lessons, but they're kind of longer and more theoretical and outlining everything that needs to happen for recovery. Then I recently created 40 quick step action
Mhm.
steps. That was feedback from the people in my program that it's awesome, but it takes a while to get going because you
Sure.
have to get this foundation. So I gave people 40, just start doing this while you're learning all
Yes.
the things you need to do. And then all of that is now in the book, which is such a wonderful thing. And the book can be purchased anywhere you buy books. So on Amazon is obviously one of the easiest things to do. Goodreads, it's there. But it has the potential to be the one thing a person does to get better. And then, if I can just offer one more thing too, is
Please.
that when I work with people, I have my own app. It's Dr. Trish Leigh. It's an app with advanced protocols that when people are my clients, I can go in, I assess their brain, I can take a brain map, see exactly how their brain is performing, where the areas of dysfunction are, and the levels. That's what I
That's
did the
so
study on.
fascinating.
It's amazing. When I started doing this work where I could see people's brains, this is part of the journey, is that like I thought that was cool because the patterns were already identified. Like ADHD has been
Hmm.
identified
Yes.
as a neurological
Yes.
developmental disorder for a long time. Same thing with stroke or Alzheimer's. So I always thought that was cool, but the brain pattern for porn hadn't been established. That's what
Right.
there's fMRI studies that basically show us similar findings, but that's why I'm so excited about this study because now I've helped thousands of people. And what I wanted to share is that my app uses a piece of technology that its hardware, but it comes with its own software and it's only $200. And I know $200 is an investment, but on the bottom of my website's drtrishleigh.com. If you go to the bottom, it says brain training headband. If you click that, it takes you through to the manufacturer and you get the best pricing if you use my link.
Okay.
But it's called Muse headband, but I use that headband myself
Well, I know.
just to
I'm
keep
totally
my
curious. I'm like, man, I need to go map my brain.
totally. And you can't map it using the software. Like I have to map it, which is
I
good.
know.
We don't want people mapping their own
No, no,
brains,
no. I
trust
wouldn't
me.
even know what I'm looking
But
at.
yeah, and it's really cool. And I've seen the what's interesting is I've seen lots of brains with betrayal trauma from
Mm.
partners. And oh, it is like when a person, and first of all, betrayal trauma is real.
Yes.
So if you feel like, and it doesn't happen to all partners, like you said, some partners are like, okay, I got this, let's go. Other partners are absolutely devastated
Yeah.
and they shift into a deep depression.
Yes.
And that's part of disillusionment. You have this
A
illusion
hundred
of this
percent.
life, and now you're like, this is illusion. I'm
Correct.
disillusioned.
Everything is a
Your
lie.
brain, it
A
is.
hundred
Your
percent.
brain shifts into this neutral mode to protect you.
Yes.
But it's your job to get your brain out of that mode. You can, you already said it, it's neuroplastic. So, like, this headband is powerful for people with addiction, but it's also powerful for partners. So, for an investment in the $200 range, both partners would have a tool to be able to
Mhm.
start regulating their brain at a subconscious, unconscious neurological level.
I
And
love
then when
this.
people work in my programs, all my programs have lessons on how to use that headband by yourself. And then also, then when I work with people, we use different software where I can set the protocols for
Mhm.
exactly what a person's brain needs. But you can get started with brain training at home.
I love this. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else you wanted to share today?
No, just, I know how difficult this situation is. And, it really requires pragmatic hope. And I know that's a lot when you can't see how it's going to end. And you want life to go back to the bliss of ignorance.
Yes.
I want people to know it is better. If you can stay in this, you get the relationship you always wanted.
Yes.
And it is such a gift, but I know it doesn't feel like it. So pragmatic hope means you're doing the things that you need to work on yourself and hold that boundary so your partner works on himself.
Mhm.
And as you start doing that, you will see the fruits of putting the effort in.
Oh,
So that's the
awesome.
pragmatic hope. You can't sit around hoping, twiddling your thumbs.
Correct.
You got to do the work.
You got to do the work. Ladies, you got to do the work. Thank you so much. This was
Yeah, no
so
problem.
fun.
My
Thank you so
pleasure.
much for coming today.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.